Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just a quick follow-up on the ICJ ruling. The way I see it, as I've said, I think that this is part of a BRICS overall strategy to nullify and to negate all of the global institutions of Western power and control, all of the colonizing institutions that the Global South has been dealing with for 75 years or more, including the ICJ, including the United Nations, and so on. Now, what they're going to do, it didn't matter what the judgment was going to be at the ICJ. The result of that would have been for one of the Global South countries to take the matter to the United Nations and ask for implementation. Now, the only way that that wouldn't have happened is if the ICJ had said, completely rejected the call for emergency measures or emergency provisions and so on. If they had completely rejected that, which was almost unthinkable, then if they were going to if they had done what they should have done, which was to call for a ceasefire, which, despite what some people are saying, they certainly could have and should have called for a ceasefire. They could have said and should have said that there is enough credible information that a genocide is underway in Gaza. It's credible enough that we're even listening to a case about that, and we have all of this evidence that we are investigating and that we are deliberating over. So, given that fact, we say that a ceasefire needs to take place immediately because it's a danger that a genocide is taking place. So they had every power to call for a ceasefire, and they didn't. But if they had called for a ceasefire, then the next step would have been for one country or a grouping of countries to take that matter to the United Nations to call for implementation. Now, that's what they're going to do now. I think Algeria has already said that they're going to do that. But it doesn't matter which country it would be. It could be Russia, could be China, could be UAE, could be Saudi Arabia, could be any number, could be South Africa. Could go to the United Nations and say, now we want to implement this. So now they can do that, even with the weak ruling that was given by the ICJ, the interim ruling. They can go to the United Nations and say, you need to implement this, which is, according to the ruling, which is to ensure that Israel is taking all preventative measures to ensure that a genocide is not taking place. And we interpret that as a need for a ceasefire. So we're going to make another call in the United Nations for a ceasefire. And what this amounts to is the Global South, is BRICS, daring the U.S. to veto. They're going to the UN saying to the United States, say veto again. Say it again. Say veto again. I dare you to say veto again. Because they will. They will say veto again. They will veto it again. And this will just further cement the understanding that the United Nations is nothing but an instrument of U.S. power. And this will give greater impetus to the Global South and to BRICS to break free from that entire institution and that entire system and that entire mechanism and to come up with their own. So I think that that's what's behind all of this. I think that that's the general planning going on. I think that BRICS is making moves and is strategizing several moves ahead. And the moves that they've planned are already anticipating the predictable moves by the United States, because the United States' behavior is entirely predictable. So I think that their prediction is, of course, that we're going to go to the UN now and call for the implementation of the ruling by the ICJ, which we interpret as being a basis and a justification for a call for a ceasefire, knowing full well that the United States is going to veto it again. And that will just further isolate the United States, and it will further make the nations of the world understand that with the presence of the United States at the United Nations, and particularly with its presence on the UN Security Council, it renders the United Nations a completely redundant and superfluous organization. So that's what I think is going to happen. And Allahu Alam. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.